Hello, what's up, everyone? 1 second. Okay, what's up, everyone? Welcome back. So, in the last video, we covered the two types of dealings, which are transfer as well as lease. Now we're going to cover the third type of dealing, which is tenancy, as well as another topic, which is rent. So, without further ado, let's go. First, tenancy. What is tenancy? Tenancy is a letting of land for a period of more than 3 years, and it is not required to be registered. We have established that in the last video, there are a lot of dealings that must be registered. This is not one of them. Okay. And the terms used in the concept of tenancy is the landlord, which is the one who gives the tenancy, and the tenant who receives the tenancy. Okay, how can we create a tenancy agreement? First, we can look at such section 213 sub 1 para A as well as 223 sub 1. It has to be more than 3 years as in with regards to the period of tenancy. And section 223 sub 1 outlines who can create a tenancy. Okay, obviously I'm not going to list it down because touch code, see, is quite full right now. And section 206 sub 2 states that a tenancy agreement can be made either orally as well as in writing. So you can choose either one. However, in sub 2 para A, it states that if the tenancy agreement is in writing, you don't need to comply with sections 207 to 212 in terms of form. So there is no dedicated form lah contoh. Okay, in section 213 sub 5, it states that the landlord cannot create charges over TXR because right now you see that TXR, okay, sorry, for to establish what TXR is basically tenancy exempt from registration. So you know that when you register a land, you when you register a dealing, you have to pay the appropriate fees, right? So since tenancy is exempt from registration, it is also exempt from any payments of fees that are related to a registration. So the landlord, in the creation of the tenancy agreement, cannot impose any charges that is with the tenancy agreement because you cannot do that lah senang cerita. Okay. In 227 sub 1, the tenant's interest is vested upon, which is fancier to say takes effect up upon the tenancy agreement punya creation and sign. Okay, how do we endorse a tenancy agreement? Okay, a tenancy agreement can only be binding onto the parties if prior registration is made. We can see this in section 213 sub 3. Okay, hence the the tenancy is protected by the endorsement by the tenant before the future seal is entered into by the landlord, and when the tenancy is registered, the endorsement binds. When the tenancy is endorsed, it is binding to the subsequent land purchases. Okay, that means that this protects the rights of the tenants lah. Senang cerita, you have to endorse untuk protect the rights of the tenants. What if the land is not endorsed and it is being entered into agreement? We can see that in the case of Tan Kok Leong against Low Kim Lai, if the land is not endorsed or the agreement is not endorsed, the tenant's interest is not protected. Hence, the landlord can ask the tenants to leave should he sell the land or any other dealings lah, macam tu, any other transaction. Okay, the process of endorsement is covered in section 316 as well as 17, which states that you have to apply for the endorsement, and the procedure is outlined in 317. Okay, you have to apply to the registrar, and there is no fixed form. That means there is no dedicated form in the NLC that indicates this is the application form. However, it must be in writing. If the tenancy relates to a part of a land, the tenant must attach the plan of the land and the description of the tenancy. Lastly, you can cancel an endorsement application by virtue of 318. So that is it. That is it for tenancy. Next, we'll move on to a new topic, which is rent. So this is not to be confused with the concept of rent that we pay macam rumah sewa and all that. The concept of rent here is the sum of money paid to the state authority by the proprietor annually. So this is with regards to renting a land by the state proprietor uh, from the state authority. Sorry, bukan state proprietor, land proprietor. Okay. In section 81, rent is a condition of alienation. So in order to alienate a land, this is a condition of alienation. So when is rent due? In section 94, sub 1 and 2, the rent is due with regards to a land at the start of every calendar year in which the alienation occurs, and if is not paid by the end of May, sorry, I'm stuttering a lot, it will be in arrears starting the 1st of June. That means that for sub 1, for example, if you rent a piece of land on the 1st of March, then your rent is due at the 1st of January of the same year. Macam tu. For example, if you rent it on the 1st of March, the 1st of March 2026, the rent is due at the 1st of January 2026, same year. And if you do not pay the rent by the end of May 2026, it will be in arrears starting the 1st of June 2026. Okay, so when rent is due, you have to pay in the actual amount and the whole amount. Maksudnya, you pay the um, full price of the land lah, the full rate of the rental of the land. However, when it is in arrear is basically tunggakan. Two things will happen. Firstly, the state authority will issue a letter of demand to demand you to pay the that is the rent that is already in arrears, and you as a proprietor will have to pay the rent as well as the penalty imposed by the state authorities. However, if you are renting a land from the month of October, you are only entitled, you only have to pay rent at the start of the following year. So using the example of rental in March tadi, if you rent in March 2026, your rent is due on January 2026, the first day, which is 1st of January, because it is the first day of every calendar year. So your rent is due on the 1st of January. However, if you are renting a piece of land on the 1st of October, you only have to pay rent at the start of the next year, which is on 1st of January 2027. Only then it is due. Okay. So where can you pay rent? You can only pay rent, I don't know if only, but you pay rent at the land administrator's office. So computation, with regards to computation is how they calculate rent with regards to a piece of land. So different factors play into the computation of land, which is outlined in section 96. The state authority will take into consideration a lot of things. Among them are the first, classification of land, as well as the category of use of the land. Okay, now moving on to this part, I think I'm gonna go here. Okay, what if you fail to pay the rent or in arrears? So when you fail to pay rent, the state authorities will issue Form 6A, and you must pay the arrear within 3 months of the issuance of the letter. However, if this is not an endorsed land, okay. However, the form of Form 6A must first be endorsed. What if the form is not endorsed? So what if they issue an unendorsed 6A? So we see that in case of Pounding and another against the Register of Titles Malacca, if the form of if Form 6A is not endorsed, you as a proprietor no need to pay anything because it is unendorsed. Because the form needs to be endorsed to be issued to you. Macam tu. Okay. So what are the rights of persons paying rent? In section 98, the rent can be paid by other persons. That means if you are the proprietor of the land, you don't necessarily have to be the one to pay for the rent. It can be paid by other people, third parties. However, it is important to note that in subsection 3, it states that if a tenant is paying rent on behalf of you, then that payment, that sum of money that he has paid for you, can be deducted from the payment he has to make to you. Macam tu. For example, if you are renting a land and you build a house and macam mana? Okay, kalau if you are an owner to a house and someone is renting that house, and he as the tenant of the house is also paying rent on behalf of you towards the state authority, whatever amount that he has paid to them, representing you, will be deducted from his payment of rental towards you for his rumah sewa. Macam tu. Okay, what are the effects of paying rent or paying arrears? Okay, in section 99, when paid the whole amount, which is the entire amount, Form 6A is no longer in effect. And in section 100, the amount of money you pay to the state authorities cannot be less than the amount of money demanded by them. Otherwise, the land that you are renting as a proprietor will be forfeited back to them. You can see this in the case of UMBC against pemungut hasil tanah kuota tinggi. Okay, lastly, revision. In section 101, the state authority can revise the rent rates from time to time, and land improvement does not affect the revision of rent rates. We see that contoh kalau you are building a house or you build a business or agriculture on your land, that is considered improvement, but it does not affect the revision of rent rates. Upon revision, the land administrator can firstly, shall means mesti, shall firstly amend the endorsed rent. Secondly, note the endorsement date on the uh, endorsed rent lah, on the amended rent rate. Okay, macam tu. Okay, so that is it. I think it's tak banyak pun. It's just, I think it's not everything. So do read up on additional info lah. Okay, that is it. See ya.